This is Mr. Perkins at 61st District. How you doing? One of the things I want to do, right, they uncovered this grave site. There was a church there, African Methodist Church, and then it was also a graveyard for the last African slave that was buried on Staten Island, Benjamin Prime. Now it's a parking lot that has Santander Bank on it. It has the tax place. It has Sherman Williams. It has 7-Eleven. But the truth is, there's still people buried up under there. But I would think, though, when the gentleman who was the great grandson and the lady who was the great granddaughter lived on the street and they didn't even know their great grandfather was buried under the bank, that's just screams out disrespect. And I really like to bring this to light. So are you the right person to speak to?
Everyone deserves to have the dignity of a proper burial.
You learn a lot about society by looking at cemeteries.
And Staten Island has so many of them, so I just don't understand why this particular space was not landmarked as a cemetery where it would have been protected, but it was paved over, which is tragic.
There were people who would ask, Black people live on Staten Island? And I go, yeah, when there were only 6 people on Staten Island. One of them was of African descent, and people need to know that.
Benjamin Prime is extremely important to Staten Island history because he was the last surviving enslaved person when he passed away in 1900.
Mr. Prime was the last slave buried there, right? A burial ground that could have up to 1,000 people in there. There was a church there, African Methodist Church, and then it was also a graveyard. Now what wound up happening was they had $11,000 in back taxes, so the city sold it. After that, they turned it into a gas station at one time. Now it's a parking lot that has Santander Bank on it. It has Sherman Williams. It has 7-Eleven. But the truth is, there's still people buried up under there. But I would think, though, when the gentleman who was the great grandson and the lady who was the great granddaughter for the last African slave that was buried on Staten Island, Benjamin Prime, and they didn't even know their great grandfather was buried under the bank, that's just screams out disrespect.
If you look at the picture of him sitting in that chair, I think he shows so much dignity. This is personal to me. You know, yes. You could talk about politics, you could talk about anything you want to, but this is personal for me because my great grandfather was a slave.
Right.
Was a slave. His mother was a slave. Children in my family were slaves, and I just think it should be recognized.
You think about it, and then you try not to think about it. And then you think about it, and then you get angry. Then you think about it, and then you say, well, you know, what's done is done. Then you think about it, and you get angry again because it's so the injustice of it all. And so it's like, let's give them some dignity in death. You know, there's babies buried there. People's families are buried there, and it's like, no one knows about it. It's like thrown under the rug, you know, and in this case, you know, paved over.
It's called the Cherry Lane Cemetery because that section of what is now Forest Avenue was called Cherry Lane. At other times, it was called the Slaves' Burying Ground because there were enslaved people interred there. It was also known as the Colored Cemetery because there were African Americans interred there.
It's kind of like a myth. There were a lot of development that really didn't take into consideration what had been there in the past. And so in that development boom, we lost contact with a lot of those rich spaces.
Everything went on Staten Island when it came to development and overdevelopment. this cemetery was expected to pay taxes to the city of New York. The burial ground was sold in the 1950s to a Seidel man who sold the land to this gas station that I actually remember going back to my youth.
I'm not mad at the property owner in one sense because it's business, right? Maybe that property manager, like everybody else, didn't have knowledge of what was under there, but the city knew.
Richard Dickinson was named Staten Island Borough Historian, and one of Mr. Dickinson's main interests was African American cemeteries on Staten Island. He approached the new owners and asked that a memorial be at the least, put in to recognize what this property was, about the church that was there, the cemetery, and especially about the fact that there were enslaved individuals buried in there. Specifically, Mr. Perrine. And there was finally a plaque put into what was then the first nationwide bank. I think he had hoped for maybe a monument because he had hoped to include names of the interred there.
The plaque is down. That's even more insult to injury. A plaque. They even took the plaque down. So like this, just like our history, if you don't record it, there's no mention of it, it's forgotten. You know, and who they were, who the plaque was for, were considered nobody, so they took the plaque away. So who's any the wiser?
When you find out something definitively and you take action to preserve that, it does send a signal to everyone, not just development, but communities, businesses, and schools, that we're here.
We really do need to look to the past to understand where we are standing right now. And then how do we use that information to move ourselves forward?
If they're voiceless and we have the voice, then you know what? Somebody has to be held accountable. I just think it's time to really kind of turn it up and get people involved.
It's got to be done time and time again to make sure people don't forget it.
Right.
And to bring their conscience up to the fact they've got to start, tone on line and be more respectful. I mean, talk is talk, but there's got to be some kind of action behind it.
The follow-up, right, and follow through.
And I know most people will say, well, that's then. That's in the past. But the past is also in the present.
But
if you don't fix the past, you'll deal with it in the present.
But this is family, so
it's personal,
I feel
yes.
It should be known. I'm not saying have parades going down the street, but just the recognition. There are people there, and like I said, it's very personal to me because it's a relative. It's a family member I never knew about, never had any idea about. Didn't know. I knew that slavery was in my family. Of course you knew. I'm African American, so I know that. But I didn't know it went back that far.
That paved ground reflects how we are viewed and the importance of our contributions are viewed. We need to figure out how we're protecting our African American history. I think it starts today.
Tell us what's happening today.
We're getting together with some press, some politicians to announce that this is going to be Benjamin Perrine Way, my great-great-great-grandfather.
It's a recognition that he's buried under there.
These people meant something to somebody, and they're in a parking lot, which is
Covered over with cement.
When I learned that the street was going to be renamed, I had to be here. And even in the 2000s, we're still uncovering, peeling off so many layers. We're still discovering some of the injustices or some of the cover-up. It just really gives me more inspiration.
People ask you, how do you feel about having a family member buried in a parking lot? I would like for the bones to be removed and them to be properly buried, but that's another day. This is the first step of street naming that is so important to us, that our great-great-great-grandfathers recognized for being the last black slave born in Staten Island. That's something that you live with, we've had to live with, and we're dealing with it, and thanks to you, his memory will not be forgotten. Thank you all. Benjamin Perrine Way. Okay, everybody, can I have your attention, please? We'd like to know what you thought about today's ceremony, how you think it went, and what does it mean that you were here. So, anyone want to start first?
I can say something. I feel like it was an amazing event, but it shouldn't stop there. I wanted to see a proper burial for those enslaved African Americans in that site. That's what we should be fighting for. That's what we should be pushing for, and that's what I'm going to stand with.
America has a debt to pay. I mean, they don't want to talk about it because it's too painful. I mean, it's painful for us.
Right, and this is an example that will lead continuously, not just Staten Island, throughout the country, that African Americans, right, are buried anywhere they want to bury them and forgotten about.
You're right, because it's not only happened
Right.
here,
It's
it
not
happens
just
all
here.
over the country.
It's all over the country.
I'm sure this is not the only family that or stories existing over. I'm sure of that.
Right.
To find out that you have a relative that was a slave and that fought in, what was the war? 1812 war for his master. And then he was buried under a strip mall where they just disregarded him.
What happened was sinful, shameful, a part of our history that was denied us, wiped out, and that we were so insignificant that they could do that to the ancestors, and then by doing that to the ancestors, they did it to us. Right? They did it to the descendants, and there's something very, very wrong with that picture, and we need to have some answers and some accountability.
New York City needs to be held accountable for what happened at Cherry Lane Cemetery.
That's right.
They are the ones who manipulated the situation and took that land for taxes, for back taxes. And so everybody that went past there today was wondering what was going on.
5 people after came up to me, what's going on here? And I had to explain it over and over. It's a groundswell. We are rewriting the history right now. And we are in position to right the injustices. So we got to look at this as a rallying call, not just for the few of us, but the community at large.
We're doing here what David's talking about is so amazing. You know, I love you. That is bigger than us, and we cannot undermine each other or the movement because it really stifles the progress. I don't care where I fit as long as I'm part of it and I'm part of moving things forward. But wherever you are, wherever you're great at, find it in this movement, in our community, and go and stay in that lane and drive it to the wheels fall off.
Get in where you fit in.
Amen, sister.
For us not to fight hard and not to continue to this struggle to make sure
disrespect and an insult to them.
It absolutely would be. Look at the descendants here. They're all accomplished. That was because they built upon the foundation that the ancestors laid for them. They suffered. It's generational trauma.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's
So when you
so
hear someone
important.
say, well,
Genetics.
that happened years and years ago, we had nothing to do with it, you can say BS.
We live it every
That's
day.
right.
Every day I'm reminded that I'm black, living here on Staten Island. Every day something reminds me that I'm black. I'm not accepted in all circles. I'm not as good. I'm not as smart. I'm not as whatever. And part of that is because there's no connectivity. They often talk about how black people have hypertension and diabetes and high cholesterol because of what we eat. That is a contributing factor, but it is the stress that we live every day. And it's the everyday that we deal with systematic racism, we deal with injustices, we deal with micro biases and microaggressions, and it every day. It's like they don't see us in our totality.
That's right.
Because our story hasn't been told.
That's right.
I think that a lot has been said so far, and I don't want to repeat everything. I concur with everything that I've heard to this point. The one thing I do know that we do need to have an education. Growing up on Staten Island and not having any idea about slavery in Staten Island is crazy. We need to teach history on Staten Island. We need to teach the history in Brooklyn. We need to teach the history in New Caledonia and teach it to the people in the area so that they know they're not just reading about something that happened down south. Slavery was down south. The slaves went north and they were free. Okay, that's not really all true. So slavery was right here where I live, and I'm pretty far north.
When I was in high school, we never talked about slavery. It was about down south, and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and a lot of slaves came up north from Georgia and everything like that. Teach your children.
That's right. Let your children know the truth.
Not like when I went to school. Like I said, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves.
That was about it.
Come on.
Thank you. That was your history lesson.
You know?
It's ridiculous. They are out of control. It's ridiculous. And we really need to, I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't mean to go on like that.
Because I appreciate the blueprint. I'm an 8th generation direct descendant to the first free black on Staten Island. I'm appreciating this entire process right here, right now, because this is an anointed, respected, and appointed conversation in this space for a very specific purpose, right? So that I can be an agent of change for the community and for the world, for them to see, like, these little people are, like, fighting. No, we're not little people. We were the first.
Today is the beginning. We have a lot of work to do. We, in support of the family, want to shape what the place will now look like, right? We know what the history is, and now we are in position to really drive the narrative moving forward. And we have to be resilient in the way that we do it, and we have to be collaborative in the way that we do it, because it becomes a collective.
I support 100% what you said, David. If there's anything I can do to help you get to the root of why your family was disrespected as it was, I would work with you if you would choose to have me work with you.
Yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen when we make it happen. If enough people get behind this and make it happen, it will happen.
We're the most forgiving race of people that's out here. Honest. I don't know any other races that have gone through what we have generationally, generation after generation, and still believe that, you know, a better day is coming.
I just want to add, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams and imagination. We must remember this. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams come true. So please, we've got to make this happen. Seriously. So when is the next meeting?
How's everything? Good to see you.
Nice to meet you. Oh yeah, I'm the great-great-grandson.
Oh, wow.
This is my great-great-grandfather that's buried out there.
Wow.
It's just a total desolation. I hate even coming here. When I start to think about how hard it is, you know, I think about, well, what are you doing? What does that say? If you give up on this, it doesn't say much about you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peggy King-Yorta. This site clearly has importance. There's a direct descendancy, and then there's a community behind it. This is a cultural site. It is a cultural site on Staten Island. It is a part of our history, and deserves the kind of integrity, cultural integrity and historical integrity and respect. And the only way that you do that is by creating a space where people can deliver that respect. When I talk about the possibilities of this site is along a residential street. When I think about sacred spaces, I think about places that are quiet. I think about kids. I think about traveling on a bike, walking and strolling to the site. I look at a building like Santander. I think about the possibilities of that building, whether it's a museum, an interpretive center, a space that gets preserved. The building exists. Sometimes we don't see possibilities because we say, no, that's impossible. There's no way anybody's going to say yes to that. You might be right, but that doesn't mean that you don't pull people together and you don't see possibilities. I always see possibilities, so it can happen.
Yeah, no, I just would like to just chime in quickly. When you look at this plaza should not be here. That's the reality. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody that has any type of business here, but you know, we got to correct any wrong from the past with a right, and that's our responsibility, and that's my priority as the member that represents this area. You know, so you know, one of the things we got to do here is work with the owner to see how we could get them to either sell it to the state, or we find another tool to take the property over, right? But this needs to come back to what it used to be, and not a shopping center.
And also keep sharing the story.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that you came here and you brought the caucus, which is the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, Asian caucus, because we are hoping for reconciliation and repair of our communities. You know, just this year we passed a bill on reparations, and it creates a commission which is going to travel across the state to hear the stories such as this.
So Cherry Lane is on the map, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as far as that goes, because that's very important.
It's very important. But I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our ancestors.
Right.
And it's important that we do that because many of them are unnamed.
Right.
We're grateful because they are named here,
right.
But there are many across the state, and Assemblyman Mayor can attest for that.
We have a cemetery where we don't know any of the individuals' names. So we are going to use your ancestors' name, and that's going to be inspiration for us. And if it can be for us in the Hudson Valley, we can make that true throughout the state of New York.
I think you just keep imagining.
Right. When you talk about possibilities, that lifts my heart, because all you people here who I've recently met and met before are about possibilities and are the movers and shakers of the world. And those are the people who I want to connect with.
Certainly.
I want people with vision. I want people with morals. I want people with integrity. And I want people who share the same human experience that I would like to share. These people who are buried here were human beings.
Right.
And they were systematically removed. And that's very hurtful to me. It's hurtful to my family. We had no idea that that my great-great-grandfather Benjamin Prine existed. You know, well, I didn't want this burden. I didn't ask for this burden. I wish it might be somebody else, but that's not the way it is. It's a part of my history now. It's a part of American history. So it's a part of all our history. I won't abandon this. I want to see it through.
I'm glad.